You are now tuned in to the Justified Through Faith podcast with Molina-Runez. Hey guys, I'm Molina-Runez and welcome to Ep.2 of the Justified Through Faith podcast. As promised, today I will be discussing the details of all of the sexual abuse cases that I was able to uncover when I was researching. And these cases actually stem all the way back to the 1950s, to our present day. But before I get into it, I just want to say that if you know Bible prophecy and you are familiar with the gospel, that you know the time that we're currently living in. It's a time of spiritual warfare, of good and evil. And we need to use our voices to expose the evil in all false religions. But we must also pray for those that their eyes may be opened and that God will reveal to them that their doctrine is false. I've been seeing so many people on TikTok and, well, it's mostly TikTok. You know, they're telling their stories and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I also feel that at the end of the day, it's not about us because we've already woken up. We already know the truth. Those of us that grew up in that religion or that cult, we know because we've pushed far past it. We've come out of it. And so anyone that knows a former member, or if you are a former member yourself, you are well aware of how indoctrinated these people are. And I used to be one of them because that's how I was raised. But we know that they will not listen to anything that you try to tell them. And it doesn't help the fact that they're taught that we, the people on the outside, the ones that they refer to as apostates, that we are mentally diseased people. It actually says that in one of their watchtowers, which it's absurd to me. But only an act of God can change this. So we have to be bold and vigilant in our prayers for all of these people. So before I go into the timeline, I wanted to explain how their cult is structured because it will give us a lot more insight into how it makes it so easy for them to cover up the abuse that has been going on. So Jehovah's Witnesses operate in such a way that proves that they think that they are above the law. And they are claiming that God is the one who is guiding them. So in every congregation, they have an internal ranking system, if you will, that puts these men in a position of authority over the congregation. And only men are allowed to obtain these higher positions. So first they have their ministerial servants who participate in it's an internal school where they give sermons and they get critiqued on those sermons. And then they are also given other responsibilities, such as organizing tasks and maintaining their kingdom halls. And if they do desire a higher position, it can take years for them to achieve this. And I personally can attest to that because growing up, I saw how everything worked. I saw how long it took for my dad to become an elder. Like that at one point, that was his goal. And they have to work really hard at it and prove themselves. So obviously the next step is to be appointed into an elder. Now, the elders are a group of men that believe that they've been appointed by God to watch over the congregation and handle sensitive matters for members that have sinned. So they conduct private meetings in which they ask very personal questions. And this is done whenever a sin is reported by another member, which that's actually encouraged. It's encouraged to the members to go and report wrongdoing if they are made aware of it and the other person doesn't want to go and tell. Basically, if you don't tell on yourself, somebody's going to tell for you. So that's how it works. So they conduct these private meetings where they ask personal questions about their sin to discern if the person is repentant enough to not be disfellowshipped. And disfellowshipping is when they are shunned. They are completely shunned. And it's even worse if your family is in the Jehovah's Witness religion, because then you're completely cut off from everyone. And they do this their whole reasoning behind this is because they say that, it makes you realize that what you did was wrong. Like it supposedly convicts you of your sin, when in actuality, it does the complete opposite, just from prior knowledge of things that go on. And, the majority of the time, people that come back from this sort of thing, they're mainly doing it because they're isolated from everybody and they feel that they have no other choice, because if they leave, then they truly have no one and they don't even know how to go about it or what that would even look like. It's a very scary thing. So basically, what these elders are doing is they're playing the role of God, and they justify this by twisting the scriptures to support their actions. So next, you have the governing body, which is the top of the top. They are the central authority that makes decisions on doctrine that's taught, things that they can and cannot do, such as their dress code, their behavior, types of entertainment that they are allowed to engage in, just pretty much everything that you have free will to do in your life. And they try to sit there and say that they don't do it, but they do, because behind closed doors, I can tell you they do. So they also appoint these traveling overseers, and they're the ones that go around to the different congregations. They give special sermons, etc. I also confirmed when I was researching that they do not do any sort of background checks before appointing any of their members to these higher positions. So that makes it even easier for them to prey and manipulate their victims. So if you have someone that, they get into the religion and, they're very enthusiastic about it, this person could have a background. They could, unknowingly, they could go in without others knowing that they have a record of being an offender, and they wouldn't know because they don't check. And this is eerily similar to the Catholic religion, I have to say, because you have those high-ranking members that abuse their power to hide their sin. And they use God and not wanting to bring reproach on God's name, which is a whole other thing that is just so incredibly wrong to even bring that into it. Because it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that God wants you to hide something this serious or not take it to the authorities. So I also referred to their website for more information and in regards to their governing body. And this is what I found in regards to their justification of having a governing body. And it's so twisted. So, quote, "The governing body follows the pattern set by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem in the first century, who made important decisions on behalf of the entire congregation." And they base this off of Acts 15, verse 2. And I will read to you what that says. Let's see here. Bear with me, guys. Sorry. kind of doing this part on the fly here. So it says, Acts 15 verses 2, this brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with them. So Paul and Barnabas were appointed, along with some other believers, to go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and elders about this question. Okay, so yes, it mentions apostles and elders, but they took that one scripture, and again, just like with everything else, they're twisting it to fit their doctrine. That is what they do, and that is what they have always done. So moving on. It also said on their website that they look to the Bible for guidance, acknowledging that Jehovah God has appointed Jesus Christ as the head of the congregation. If a sin is determined to be significant enough, the elders will then assemble, you ready for this? A judicial committee that investigates reports of wrongdoing. Wow. So the word investigates automatically tells me invasion of privacy. They hear evidence, consider testimonies, and make the final decision of whether or not the person will be disfellowshipped, which is, no, I already explained that. Let's see. So then they announce it in front of the entire congregation so that everyone knows not to talk to you. And anytime that they were going to make an announcement like that, it was just always so awkward. I remember, and we would always know when it was going to happen because they would say, oh, brother so-and-so is going to come up here and make an announcement. If you're an XJW, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And everyone knew that it was not going to be good. So lastly, when abuse is reported, they adhere to a strict two-witness rule, which again is another scripture that they have twisted to fit their rules, their man-made rules. They also justify not reporting to the authorities by saying it will bring reproach to God's name. Again, twisting the scriptures to continue to gaslight their members into thinking that this is okay. So, with all of that being said, let's get right into the timeline of cases. I have quite a few of them. So, we start in the 1990s. The article is entitled, Jehovah's Witnesses Administrator Confessed Child Abuse Without Substantial Consequence. And this is from theguardian.com. So, a U.S. man serving in various administrative roles for the Jehovah's Witnesses sexually molested a child whom he met while working for the Christian religious sect in New Orleans. He then continued his career virtually unimpeded and moved to North Carolina after completing a disciplinary suspension of less than a year. The stunning revelations about Joseph Fitzgerald Hall, that was his name, and how he has been managed by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York that runs Jehovah's Witnesses are contained in a lawsuit that the abuse survivor has been pursuing. In a recent interview, they explained that one of his main reasons for coming forward was to ensure the congregation knew the full truth about him. And while testifying under oath, he acknowledged that there was no requirement. He acknowledged it, that there was no requirement to tell someone why you were disfellowshipped. So he gets disfellowshipped for sexual abuse, but yet is not required to tell anyone. Red flag number one, okay? So Davis, who was the person that was sexually abused, he's the victim, it said that he shed his anonymity to support others who for years have been speaking out about this abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses. It said he contended that this evidence in his case drives the nail in to the coffin about the reality of the issue. And in his opinion, he said that nothing has changed. And And I just want to skim over the article because there's really a lot of information, but I just want to get the most important parts of the article. So it says here in the lawsuit that Hall, who was the perpetrator, he ultimately took advantage of the proximity to rape Davis and inflict other sexually abusive acts on him from 1990 to 1996. Beginning when he was 11, Hall would tell Davis that he was the age of accountability and therefore the boy bore fault for his molestation. So basically, he made the boy think that it was okay, that it was his fault because he was old enough to be accountable for his actions. That is just, honestly, that's sickening. So it says then that Davis recalled disclosing his abuse to his mother along with another elder at their congregation by 1998. And in February of that year, the elder initiated a type of disciplinary hearing that the Jehovah's Witnesses refer to as a judicial committee, which is what I was just talking about in the beginning. So then we're going to pop down. Let's see. Okay. So it says that multiple congregation elders who formed part of the committee heard Davis deliver an account of his molestation that he endured. The committee subsequently disfellowshipped Hall for 11 months, during which time he was suspended from the congregation before he was allowed to return. Meanwhile, the committee instructed Davis, who was the victim, that he needed to repent and quit his homosexual lifestyle. The group prohibited Davis from carrying out his privileges. So it says from carrying the microphone, which, again, if you are an XJW, you know that they have people that carry microphones around so that people can participate in their meetings and make comments. So I guess that's what he was doing at the time. And it said that he did comply. Davis did comply with the committee's wishes for years, even after he was kicked out of standing in a friend's wedding when news of his having tried to hold Hall accountable got around to the congregation. So basically, they were making him out to be the bad one. He eventually left and says in 2014, about 6 years after his mother passed, he decided to revisit Hall's abuse and the resulting treatment that he got from Jehovah's Witnesses after seeing a local news story about an attorney filing a lawsuit. He reached out to that lawyer who could not assist him because his case was in Louisiana. But in 2019, he contacted a New Orleans-based attorney who represented a number of religious abuse survivors. He was about 40 at that time, it says. So this is very recent that he decided to come forward. I mean, we can see. And that's very common with abuse survivors. They are, especially men, because it's a shameful thing for them to have to come out and, describe what happened to them. And I mean, really for anybody, but like I said, especially for men. So it says that he demanded damages from the Kingdom Hall and the Watchtower Society for mental and physical trauma. It goes into detail about what they did, which I'm not going to read that. Just, use your imagination. Hall ended up writing a book which Davis authored and self-published about his abuse. And it speaks truthfully to a large degree about the encounters. So basically what ended up happening, I'm just going to wrap this one up because we have more to go through. Nothing much ended up happening to his abuser. I mean, he was, like I said, disfellowshipped. But for the most part, Davis, the victim, was the one that was shamed and held accountable for being abused. All right, next article. There's a lot of them. So this one's called Judge Sentences Two Jehovah's Witness Elders to Court Supervision and Community Service for Failing to Report Sexual Assault. And this comes from the LakeMHenryScanner.com. The article was released in 2005. So this one starts off by saying that there was two Jehovah's Witnesses elders in Crystal Lake, which I'm honestly not sure what state this was in, but anyways, they had failed to report the sexual assault of a child, and they were sentenced to court supervision and community service for not reporting it. So the court documents allege that those two elders were mandated reporters, and one of them was actually, let's see. Okay, so this was the guy. His name was Arturo Hernandez Pedraza. He was the perpetrator. He was the one that committed the sexual assault. He was found guilty in 2019 of over a dozen sex crimes against this young girl. It says that okay, so he threatened to kill the victim and her mother. He threatened to kill her, the mother, and the brother if she told anyone about the assaults. The girl then told her mom when she was 6 years old. That's really small. I mean, I cannot imagine being that young and having to tell my mom about that, because most people hold that in until they get a lot older. But, you know, that was very brave of her to do that at such a young age, I have to say. So it says that the girl reported the abuse again in 2018 to Jehovah's Witnesses, that particular Kingdom Hall, and they finally reported it to the police. Okay. So, I mean, this happened, you know, I don't know, I guess 10 years prior. It doesn't really give a date, but I mean, I'm just guessing because she was so young. But so they were informed that they did not report it to the police. And again, in 2018, they finally opened an investigation with the police department. The perpetrator was sentenced to 50 years in prison and required to register for life as a sex offender upon his release. This is such an amazing ending to this particular case, because he was actually served justice, even though the right thing was not done in the beginning of not being reported. At least it ended up where he had to take accountability for it and do the proper process. So this is just another example of their rules, their internal rules that they have in their religion, where they are, you know, they don't want to report it because they don't want to make themselves look bad. But I mean, how does it make you look any better when it comes out and it gets leaked like this? It just looks like you are lying to everyone, and you're not being, they proclaim to be these extremely holy spiritual people. But if you're hiding something like this, then your credibility goes out the window. You can be the nicest people in the world, but anybody that thinks for themselves and uses critical thinking skills would not want to get involved in a religion that does things like this. Okay, so the next story, let me scroll down here. Hidden abuse under the Watchtower religion and government. Jehovah's Witnesses shield child sex abusers from police, report says. So it says in this article, Jehovah's Witnesses policies, again, allow child sexual abusers to operate within their congregations without fear that they will be reported to the police. So again, the same common theme in this article is that they are allowing these people to hold these high positions and not be worried because nobody's going to say anything. It's just, it's astonishing to me. So, moving forward, since 1950, Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters in Australia has fielded allegations of child sexual abuse against 1,006 members involving at least 1,800 victims. 1,800 victims. Although 579 members confessed to abusing children, zero, were reported to police or other authorities. Again, quote, in this article, it is the policy and practice of the Jehovah's Witnesses organization to not report allegations of child sexual abuse to the police or other authorities unless required by law to do so. When is it not required by law? It is required anytime that you are made aware of it. I mean, anytime you go to see a therapist or a counselor, if you report any kind of abuse, they are a mandated reporter. They have to go and report it to the authorities. But yet, these people want to sit here and say that when it's required, it's always required. But they think that they're the exception to the rule because they're a religious organization. So the attorney who led the inquiry for the Austrian Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse submitted 77 separate points critical of the Jehovah's Witnesses policies and practices toward child sexual abuse and testimony given during the hearings. The findings back up those of a reveal investigation that showed how Jehovah's Witnesses policies have shielded, once again, they're shielding these people from prosecution. In some cases, allowing them to abuse more children because they're not reporting it. So how is anyone going to know? They're going to keep doing it because of their policies. And so it says that Stewart, who was the attorney again, he wrote that the organization had fostered among its followers a sense of distrust of secular authorities. He was especially harsh towards the organization's internal judicial process. Again, their judicial committee that they form, okay, in which a victim of child abuse must confront the abuser and is prohibited from bringing anyone along for support during the process. Okay, backtrack. They adhere very strictly to this 2-witness rule, right? But yet, when it comes to them confronting the abuser and this judicial committee, they don't allow an adult to go with them? You guys, okay. Deep breath. This is very upsetting. So, going down, the current documented process for responding to allegations of child sexual abuse in the organization is focused largely on the rights and comfort of the accused with little regard to the requirements of a victim of abuse. He also the attorney took issue with the practice of shunning members, aka disfellowshipping, who leave or are kicked out of the organization. The Jehovah's Witness organization's policy of requiring its adherents to actively shun those who leave the organization is particularly cruel on those who have suffered sexual child abuse in the organization who wish to leave because they feel that their complaints have not been adequately dealt with. And again, this is another thing. I have read stories about people being disfellowshipped because they are wanting to confront these people, and the elders in the congregation don't want it to come out because they're protecting the abuser. Make it make sense. Okay, so continuing in this particular article. So it says that Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters in Australia receives allegations of child abuse about 3 or 4 times a month. So that tells you right there that what I'm reading to you, what I researched online, and what I found is just the tip of the iceberg. Just the tip of the iceberg. It's probably about 10% of the cases that have actually happened, because I can guarantee you the majority of people have either left or they're staying in the religion and they're just afraid to say something until one day they combust because they're sick of it and they just go berserk on people, because I'm pretty sure that's what I would do. I'd probably lose it. I can't imagine holding that in all that time and then just sitting there and nodding my head like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's not okay. So it says that we conclude with saying that the Royal Commission has the authority to investigate any private or public organization that works with children, including churches, schools, treatment centers, and sports clubs. The Commission lacks the power to prosecute accused child abusers, but has referred more than 800 cases. Jehovah's Witnesses are currently under investigation in the UK, and they are, because I confirmed this, by the commission that regulates charities there for possible failure to protect children from child abuse. Again, the common theme remains: failure to protect and report child abuse. Next article, and this is from February 2015. This one is entitled, Jehovah's Witnesses Use First Amendment to Hide Child Sex Abuse Claims. And this, you may have heard or read or seen things talking about how they have a secret internal database. And I wanted to research this to see if these claims were actually true, because it is not my intent to sit here and just make up baseless false claims for fun. That's not my purpose. My purpose here is to shed light and bring truth to this situation, and to just let people know what's going on. And then it is up to you. If you are still a Jehovah's Witness and you hear this podcast and you choose not to research on your own what I'm saying, hey, you know what? You're going to have to deal with that later on. And I'm pretty sure that at some point your conscience is going to start bothering you. So, all right, so let's read this next article. The leadership of the Jehovah's Witnesses for 25 years has instructed its elders to keep cases of child sexual abuse secret from law enforcement and members of their own congregations, according to an examination of thousands of pages of documents in recent cases. The religion's parent organization, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, issued the directives in at least 10 memos dating back to 1989. Although the memos were anonymously written, officials have testified that the organization's governing body approved all of them. So they were a willing participant in covering up, which leads us to their secret internal database, okay? So the most recent letter, they say dated November 6th, 2014, instructed the elders to form confidential committees to handle potential crime matters internally. In some cases, the elders will form a judicial committee. There's that word again, judicial committee, to handle the alleged wrongdoing that may also constitute a violation of criminal law. Murder, rape, child abuse, fraud, theft, assault, you name it, it's going to the judicial committee before it would ever go to the authorities. Generally, the elders should not delay judicial committee process, but strict confidentiality must be maintained to avoid unnecessary entanglement with secular authorities who may be conducting a criminal investigation of the matter. Okay, I mean, I get that part, like sensitive information, that's pretty much a given in most cases that are being investigated. But again, it just falls within the theme of them keeping it a secret. So, internal documents obtained show that the witnesses have systematically instructed elders, elders and other leaders to keep child sexual abuse confidential while collecting detailed information on congregants who prey on children. Having successfully leveraged the First Amendment as a defense of their right to not serve in the military or salute the American flag, the Jehovah's Witnesses are now using a similar legal strategy to defend policies that shield serial predators from prosecution by law enforcement. So they can exercise their First Amendment right to not go into the military. Okay, and that's a whole other thing because they're not allowed to say the national anthem and all those other patriotic things, right? They're told that they abstain from those things. But when it comes to something as serious as sexual abuse, they are using it again to twist and contort, their doctrine to how they want things to go, and so that things can work in their favor. Very manipulative, and definitely gaslighting people, that's for sure. So the article goes on to say, oh wow, okay, so this is a quote from one of the attorneys on the case. I guess he was one of the prosecutors. It says, this is how Jehovah's Witnesses operate. You come to us first. Don't tell anybody. You don't warn parents in the congregation because we will decide what happens here. That is their policy. And that's what was determined by this attorney on this particular case. And then the article goes on to say that in many ways, the response by the witnesses of recent child sexual abuse cases has mirrored the actions of another religious group, the ultra-Orthodox Jews in New York. Wow. So it says there in New York, that community has faced a backlash for asking observant Jews to consult a rabbi instead of going immediately to police with the evidence of abuse. With the witnesses, however, there appears to be far more documentation and a bureaucratic protocol for dealing with allegations of abuse among its members, which, I mean, to me, that means nothing, because if you're not going to go report to the authorities, then what good is all of your documentation going to do? It's just going into their secret internal database, okay? So it says that they had called in a software expert who testified that by using simple search terms, the witnesses could produce information in less than 2 months or maybe 2 days. And at that point, the Watchtower simply refused to provide the database. That screams guilty to me. What are you hiding? If you are not guilty of these things that you are going on trial for, then why can't you produce the database? Because you're hiding something and you don't want people to know about it. But guess what? It's being exposed now. You can't hide from the internet, okay? You may have been able to hide back in the 80s and the 50s when all this stuff started happening. But now, with the internet, nothing is secret. You can type something right into ChatGPT and it will give you an answer. It will scan all of the resources online, and it will tell you exactly what you need to know. Okay, so going down, let's see. So the victim, it said that he had reported, him and his mother had reported the abuse to the elders in 1986, but they didn't call police or warn the congregation, and they left their religion soon after. Well, good for them. I mean, at least they left. At least they were smart enough to leave. So I give them props for that, for sure. It says the abuser continued to sexually assault children. The elders still promoted him within the congregation to ministerial servant in 1988, then to an elder in 1993, according to a 1995 letter from the elders to the Watchtower. It says, after a letter reached the Watchtower later that year, the elders confronted Campos in 1995. He confessed and was disfellowshipped, the witness's version of excommunication. By then, he had at least 7 known victims. Now, if they had done the right thing in the first place, that would have prevented so many kids from being abused and having lifelong trauma. But instead, again, they choose to protect and cover up so that they can save face. And that's what this is all about. They hide behind the guise of saying that, oh, we don't want to bring reproach on Jehovah's name. First of all, it's Jesus, because they don't believe that Jesus is God. That's another episode. But regardless, they hide behind that. And it's sick. It's sick. Because God does not want you to hide things like this. And he will always make sure that it comes out. He will always make sure that justice is served. All right. So, concluding with this particular article. Here we go. He was reinstated to the congregation in 2000, 8 months after the elders sent a letter to the Watchtower explaining they had managed to keep Campos' past hidden. Court documents show the community does not know of all of this, and there was no publicity about this. Everything took place in the congregation, and because of that, he was not prosecuted. And he fled to Mexico. Wow. It says that during the trial as well, that it was said that the Watchtower again instructs elders that child abuse must be kept confidential. Now, I can understand not going and blabbing to everyone, but the way that they do it, it's completely wrong. They should not be hiding this from authorities. Like, I'm not saying you need to go and just tell everybody. No, because the victim, probably doesn't want everybody knowing, but still, like, people need to know that these things are happening so that they can protect their kids and know to watch out for that person. If anything, they should be kicked out. I mean, this is crazy that they're allowing them to stay in the congregation and be promoted to higher positions. I'm telling you, this reminds me so much of the articles that I've read about the Catholic religion. It is so similar, and it's really sad. All right. So again, in this article, we just have a very clear pattern. It doesn't really say, because I guess he fled to Mexico. So it doesn't really say that anything else happened to this guy. Of course not. So, we've got increasing claims of cover-ups. And all right, so it says here next, a pair of sisters in Vermont filed a suit in September. And I don't have the date on this. Well, it's the same article. So this one was in, 2015. Okay, so that must have been in 2015 when these sisters filed the lawsuit. Anyways, so they were claiming in the lawsuit that a member of the congregation molested them when they were as young as 4. So again, They're waiting a long time to report it because they're scared. And it says when they reported the abuse to the elders in the congregation, they were called liars. The next month, 5 women and 1 man filed a joint lawsuit alleging that an elder in their congregation sexually abused them while they were all younger than 13. In Oregon in December, 2 former witnesses sued the Watchtower and a local congregation. Boy, we just keep rolling. More and more and more. I'm telling you, there's so many. It's insane. So they were claiming the defendants kept silent after learning that an elder had sexually abused them when they were in grade school. Since 2012, attorneys have filed more than a dozen similar suits against the Watchtower in Connecticut, Florida, New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, and other states. The Watchtower uses the same old defense that they always do, that such cases violate protections under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. This has led to the dismissal of several lawsuits. So they're winning these lawsuits. Watchtower lawyers argue that judicial questioning of the spiritual beliefs and practices of Jehovah's Witnesses would trample the organization's religious freedoms. So again, they're hiding behind the guise of a religious organization in order to protect pedophiles. So the article goes on to say that at the heart of this issue is the Watchtower's own child abuse policy memos. Each memo, again, we're seeing these memos in this article, they are addressed to the bodies of elders. And they have a letterhead, it says, of either the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society or the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm sorry, but you should be ashamed of yourselves. You call yourselves Christians and you're covering up things like this? You don't follow Jesus. You don't. So, a 1989 Watchtower memo reads, often the peace, unity, and spiritual well-being of the congregation are at stake. Improper use of the tongue by an elder can result in serious legal problems for the individual, the congregation, and even the society. So again, they are more worried about how they look and saving face rather than getting justice for the victims. And it just reminds me so much of when I was growing up in that religion. And it was always about looking good. Make sure that, you're this perfect little well-behaved child because we don't want to look bad in front of other people, or don't say this or don't say that. They are very much like that. And they will try to sit there and tell you that they're not, so that they can make you think that they're these perfect, peaceful people. But behind closed doors, they are doing the opposite of what they are telling you. So when they're coming to your door and they're preaching to you about their Jehovah God, and they're putting on this nice smiley face, once they reel you in, you truly find out the inner workings of how their organization operates. And it's very hypocritical. So let's continue with this article. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses refer to people that are not in their organization as worldly people. Okay, so this article goes on to state that worldly persons are quick to resort to lawsuits if they feel their rights have been violated, according to the document. Substantial monetary damages could be assessed against the elders or congregation. In some cases where the authorities are involved, certain complications could lead to a fine or imprisonment. Subsequent memos reinforced the Watchtower's policies, culminating in a 1997 letter that directed elders to report all known or suspected child sexual abusers, past, present, and future. This memo appears to be the foundation of the base referenced in Jose Lopez's case. The memo lists 11 questions that must be answered in each case, including the name of the perpetrator, age of the victim, and how many times the abuse occurred. Other questions appear to be designed to gauge the perpetrator's risk of exposure. How is he viewed in the community and by the authorities? Has he lived down any notoriety in the community? Are members of the congregation aware of what took place? Wow, okay. So it goes on to say that in the Lopez trial, the Watchtower refused, once again, to provide a list of its perpetrators in violation of an order upheld by the California Supreme Court. It also refused to provide the longest serving member of the governing body who was subpoenaed. So you're telling me that this high-ranking member in the governing body was refusing to be subpoenaed. That is just, wow. So as a result, the Superior Court judge disqualified the Watchtower's defense. So basically, like, what they were saying was completely tossed out because they wouldn't comply and they wouldn't even let them subpoena this guy. So Watchtower's actions or omissions were reprehensible. I think disgraceful may be synonymous with reprehensible. Yes, I agree. But I think disgraceful doesn't say enough about it. Yeah, I agree with that as well. The award of punitive damages against them will hopefully send a message to Watchtower and its managing agents, the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses, that their handling of sex abuse cases within their congregation was absolutely reckless. Reckless. Yeah, that's one word to describe it. Her $13.5 million verdict was based solely on Lopez's evidence and testimony. They fight every request for documents. They'll take a hit not to produce what they know, said the attorney that was representing this victim. Not every individual who has sexually abused a child in the past is considered a predator. The Watchtower, not the local body of elders, determines whether an individual who has sexually abused children in the past will be considered a predator. This was in a 2012 Watchtower memo. What is happening? Okay, I have been out of this religion for almost 20 years. I was in my mid-20s when I left. I'm now 42. So I have not been to a gathering of theirs in a very long time. So I don't know what's happening unless I read about it online. And it just recently, all of this stuff started to come out. And that's when it started gaining a lot more traction. And that's when I started looking into it. But this, where it says that the body of elders are the ones that determine if they're a predator, again, they're acting and playing the role of God. Like how? You know, they talk so much about training your conscience in the Jehovah's Witnesses religion. They really do. They talk about that a lot. And that's one of the things that stands out in my mind when I was a kid. Train your conscience and you need to be sensitive to this and that. But yet, we're not sensitive to the most appalling, disgusting, sickening act that a person could ever commit against a child. And yet you're going to sit here and tell me that this can happen and, we still need to make a determination. But what are you basing that off of? I don't understand. Because at the end of the day, everything that I've just read here is all to save face for their organization so that they don't look bad. But you want to know something? All of that covering up for all of these years, it's finally backfiring. It's finally backfiring and it's coming out because everything that is done in the dark will come to light because God will make sure of it. And I just want to say as well that I am not doing this to, be petty because my entire family is still in the religion. It's not for that reason. It's because I know that people that are still in the religion, they don't listen to outsiders. But maybe, just maybe, you can plant a seed if they happen to hear a snippet of this podcast talking about it. Maybe. It's a long shot. I get that. But you do have some members that are still going to their meetings, because I read about it on these Reddit threads. They call them PIMOs, P-I-M-O, physically and mentally out. And so basically these are people that are still there, but they're not mentally there. Like they're on their way out the door. So all it takes is for one of these people to hear the details of these cases and things that I'm talking about, how, the continuous theme in every single story that I've read to you guys is that everything that they're doing is to save face, and that they're hiding it because they don't want it to get out, because they don't want to look bad. All of that work for nothing. If you would have just been up front in the first place, none of this would be happening. So this article goes on to say that the Watchtower bases its child abuse policies on scripture, supposedly. Disobey the policy and you disobey God. For emphasis, the authors punctuate many of their policy directives with verses from the Bible. Again, twisting scripture to fit their doctrine and their man-made rules. For example, if a child reports to an elder that someone in the congregation has molested him or her, the child, and here we go with the 2-witness rule. You ready? Okay. The child must produce another witness to the crime before the elders will investigate the allegation. The so-called 2-witness rule from the memo comes from Deuteronomy 19:15. No single witness should rise up against a man respecting any error or sin. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, the matter should stand good. I am sorry, but you cannot take that scripture and apply that to child sexual abuse. You should be ashamed of yourself for even thinking of doing that. How are you going to take God's word and twist it to hide sexual abuse? It's just sickening. So let's see. So that's scripture. It goes on to talk about that although most incidents of child abuse don't occur in the presence of witnesses, yeah, no, they don't, or else they wouldn't be doing it. So the senior official, Richard Ashe, said in his deposition that elders are bound. So this guy is saying that the elders are bound by this 2-witness rule. The truth has the ring of truth to it, but it still has to be established scripturally by the mouth of 2 witnesses for the congregation to be authorized to take any action. The only other way elders are allowed to take action is if the perpetrator confesses. Since when does a sexual predator just come forward and confess? Since when? The majority of the time, they're going to deny it. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to come out and say that they did it. So how are they leaving the victim's fate basically in the hands of this person waiting for them to come forward? Watchtower officials say they instruct their members to obey state laws. Yeah, okay. Their policy memos direct elders who hear of alleged child abuse to contact the society's legal department. That is the absolute worst thing that you could possibly do. I know how those people operate. All right, so here's another case. We're getting towards the bottom of this document that I have here. So this was from California, and they're saying in this case they have exposed the way the Jehovah's Witnesses have hidden abuse from the authorities. Again, enabling these predators to have more victims. In 1993, in Fremont, California, a Jehovah's Witness confessed to 2 elders that he had sexually abused his 13-year-old stepdaughter as she slept. Kendrick's wife and her daughter, the victim, were present at this confession. Okay, this is shocking. This is actually a very rare situation, and the first one that I've read of where the person has come forward and said what they did. 2 weeks later, a letter from the Watchtower advised the elders that his conduct had constituted a minor uncleanness and that he could remain a member of the congregation. However, the letter said it would be appropriate for 2 elders to meet with him and provide him with strong scriptural counsel. So they're treating child abuse as a minor matter. Got it. The Watchtower determined that Kendrick's crime didn't warrant police involvement, disfellowshipping, or a warning to the congregation because the incident was known outside of the immediate family. It said Kendrick should lose his title of ministerial servant. Oh, horrible. Which meant that he could no longer pass out Watchtower literature at the Kingdom Halls or turn on the microphone at the start of the meetings. You got me on that one. That's just a horrible punishment. The elders have testified that they watched Kendrick closely and told him not to be alone with children. Oh, because you're telling him not to be alone with children means that he's not going to do it? Sure. But he was allowed to continue preaching the Bible door to door. Okay, so let's say he was by himself, which, I mean, sometimes when the witnesses go door to door, sometimes it's just one person by themselves. So, I mean, he could have easily had another victim right there. It goes on to say that this guy and his wife separated in 1997, thank goodness, and he moved about 60 miles north to the city of Oakley, where he joined another local congregation and struck up a courtship with a recently widowed witness. Oh, shocking. He started dating a very vulnerable person that had just lost their spouse. Interesting. So it goes on to say in this article that when he went to the other congregation that, because their courtship caught the attention of the elders. They say he told me about an incident with his stepdaughter, but when he told that story, he told it as it was an accidental touching. How do you accidentally touch someone like that? That is not possible. How are they believing these people? Okay, so it says the person I guess that he told, it says the version I remember is he was coming home, it was dark, she was on the couch, he tripped on it and accidentally touched her breast. Later, in a court deposition, this perpetrator acknowledged that he had lied to that elder. Whenever I talked to anybody about that incident, I would use the term battery, he said in the deposition. I dropped the word sexual battery. I didn't want people to think I had been having sex with a child, so I just used the term battery, whether it was with Roger or anybody else. About a year after Kendrick arrived in Oakley, he proposed to his girlfriend. So then there was this letter to these elders in the congregation where he was now attending, and it was signed by this other elder, I guess, from the previous congregation that he was in, mentioned nothing about his abuse of his stepdaughter. Although the elders had placed restrictions on Kendrick for loss of temper, they had since lifted them. Okay, whoa. Loss of temper. So, I mean, they didn't go into that in the beginning of the article, but I can only imagine what that means. And then the letter goes on to say, you will find him to be a fine individual, kind, loving, and appreciates the refreshment of the Christian brotherhood. He is a very interesting individual who has taken the lead with some young ones in the congregation and helped them from veering off course. Really? Sexually abusing young ones is helping them or preventing them from veering off course? Okay. So it says that months later, an elder of the congregation sent a second report to the new congregation where it nowhere mentioned sexual abuse. It says, I cannot overstate how powerful those 2 letters were. Where does it say he's a child abuser? My conclusion was that Jonathan was telling me the truth, and every document that we saw said that he was telling the truth and that we could go ahead with that wedding. So he was able to go forward with marrying this new person that he met. Okay. So again, nothing's happening to him. Okay, so it goes on to talk about how like the elders are talking amongst themselves, like, oh, we need to find out if he's really going to be a good husband. And this is what you're concerned about? You should be more concerned about the fact that you have a child abuser that has come into your congregation. That's what you should be more concerned with. So anyways, the article goes on to say that they got married anyways in 1999. Oh, okay. So here's where the violence fits in. The story goes on to say that in 2003 that this guy, the abuser, broke a glass over the head of this younger kid in a drunken fit, which I'm guessing, oh, okay, so it was the lady's son that he married. It was her son that he broke the glass over his head. The adult brothers had enough and went to their mother's house one night when no one was home to look for information about Kendrick. When they loaded a recovery software program onto his computer, Josh said in the sworn testimony they found child pornography. I swear to God, it made my heart almost come out of my chest because he'd been around my daughter for years. They then asked his 8-year-old daughter whether he had ever abused her, which she confirmed. It said that he remembered the mom asking whether it was true. And it goes on to say that I don't think I had said much. Okay, I guess this was the son. Oh, that he was cutting his wrists at the time, probably to deal with all the stress. So soon after, they tracked down the perpetrator's ex-wife, who then told him that he had abused their daughter almost a decade earlier. When they learned this, okay, so come to find out that the elders knew about this and they withheld that information from his new family. His new family. They left out that he wasn't allowed to be around kids because he had an incident with his stepdaughter from his previous marriage where he had touched her improperly. After the son was cutting his wrist, he spent 3 days recovering in a hospital. Wow. So he got so yes, he was charged. So they investigated him about the daughter's allegations. And then the son was reporting the abuse to the police. And okay, so he gave the police the disc with the child pornography that they were able to find with the software program that was copied from his computer. But he was never investigated for it. never investigated for it. Again, another instance where they're not investigated for it. It says that although he had confessed to the elders, according to court records, he neither cooperated with the law enforcement investigation. So that means neither the elders or Kendrick cooperated because, again, they were covering it up. And then it goes on to say that this sergeant, in a deposition, said that his calls were not returned. So, just another story about covering up. He did eventually plead guilty to committing a lewd act on a minor under 14 in 2003, and he only spent 8 months in jail. And then it says that he underwent sex offender treatment. This is crazy. Oh, so the next part of this article does go on to say that he had another victim that came forward. And this was years after she had already left the Jehovah's Witnesses in 2009, it said, when she decided to look him up on the internet, the perpetrator. It said that she had never reported the incident when he did abuse her. She broke down when she found him on a sex offender registry. I know it never left me, she said, knowing that he had hurt somebody else, knowing that he went to a different Kingdom Hall and hurt somebody else, and that person was the same age as me. And this lady was born into the Jehovah's Witnesses. It says both of her parents and her grandparents on her mother's side were witnesses. She started preaching, door to door when she was 5, handing out Watchtower pamphlets. She says, I just remember my whole opening spiel was, wouldn't you love to live in a beautiful place like this? You're bringing them to Jehovah's organization because you're saving these people's lives. According to this woman, when she was 9 and 10 years old, Kendrick used the time that they had alone because they were close friends with another family. With his family. They were close friends with him. That he would take that time when they were alone to his house, and that's when he would assault her. And she says that she kept the abuse to herself for years. Again, like I said earlier, very common. While there was no dispute that Kendrick molested at least 2 girls, he emphatically denied ever abusing or even being alone with this woman. He would only say during a brief phone interview, I did not molest this person. I have never been questioned by law enforcement, and I've never been charged with a crime involving this person. He would not comment on any other cases. Wow. And so I'm just kind of scrolling because I don't want to this is kind of a long article. So again, the article just concludes with them talking about how the elders are required to the Watchtower's strict policies about not reporting these cases. All right, so this is the very last part of my research that I did. And this article is entitled, How the Jehovah's Witnesses Sex Abuse Crisis in Pennsylvania Unfolded. And this is from July 6th of this year, 2025. So this article starts off by talking about this young woman that came forward to report a rape, that she was raped and beaten. Not only raped, but she was beaten by a member of the Jehovah's Witness congregation, and that law enforcement agents finally confronted him 3 years ago at his home in Butler County. Okay, so this was from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to be exact. It says that they questioned him about the repeated abuse that started when she was just 12. They asked him about the acts that he forced her to perform, and they pressed him about his own admission to the crimes during a secret meeting with congregation members who launched their own inquiry. But again, never disclosed the allegations to law enforcement. It says that police tried to ask more questions, but the interview was cut short, telling agents that he was afraid of going to jail. Shocking. When law enforcement agents returned weeks later, they had an arrest warrant. He bolted into his bathroom and shot himself in the head. What a coward. Not surprising. The 61-year-old man was one of the first suspects to be targeted by a statewide grand jury in Pennsylvania and what has become the nation's largest probe into sexual abuse by worshipers and elders within the Jehovah's Witnesses, in many cases involving the rape and molesting of young children. Not since, this is big, guys, this article says, not since the Catholic Church crisis unfolded 7 years ago in Pennsylvania has a religious institution been singled out for widespread abuse within its ranks, in some cases by the very people who children were taught to trust. So, earlier when I was saying that this reminded me eerily of the stories of the Catholic Church, this article just confirms that. So it goes on to say, since 2019, prosecutors have turned up troves of internal files within the confines of worship halls and church computers, revealing details of abuse dating back to 1990 and as recent as 2014. In nearly all of the cases, not just some of them, every one of them, they were not reported to the police. One of these survivors says that it really destroyed me. You realize it's not just a seed and it's not just a little personal thing because it's rooted all the way up to the headquarters. And she's referring to the Watchtower and Tract Society located in upstate New York. So this goes really deep. They are going to great lengths to hide this. It's astonishing to me. When I started researching this, I had no idea that I was going to uncover all of this information. When I started looking into this, I really thought that it was a couple of cases, but this is way bigger than I ever imagined. And so they now have an attorney general on this. This was launched by the state, an investigation. And so far they have arrested 16 people and they have 11 convictions. But the investigation is ongoing into congregations in nearly every corner of the state. At least 3 alleged abusers are awaiting trials to start this year, and only 1 defendant so far has been acquitted. So that's good news. That's good news. That gives me hope that something, that this particular investigation is getting somewhere and that they're not getting off from some First Amendment technicality. So the article goes on to say that while the investigation shares remarkable similarities to the Catholic Church scandal, there is a stark difference. Many of the allegations are buried in tight-knit faith communities where the elders not only lead prayer worship, but advise members on some of the most personal matters of their lives. Anything that happens in your life, says a former member, would come to the elders first. That's part of the culture. Nowhere is the crisis more striking than the religion's birthplace, Western Pennsylvania. The Jehovah's Witnesses were founded by a small group near Pittsburgh more than a century ago, and today at least 9 of the arrests have taken place in that region, including 4 in Allegheny County. In one case in Allegheny County, it stated that there was 2 young girls assaulted dozens of times nearly 2 decades ago while serving as their legal guardian by this one man. It says that he was preying on the victims while they showered or slept alone at night. That was shown in the court records, it says. And in one of the probe's most highly publicized cases, this person named Sean Sheffer, a member of the, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, this one congregation in Pennsylvania, he was convicted this year of repeatedly raping and molesting a young girl with autism who struggled to speak before the age of 5. Both men have been sentenced to prison. Sheffer up to 34 years and Brown, the other guy, up to 30 years in state prison. So the the statement where that kid was talking about how it's part of the culture, and it's a normal thing to go to elders with very personal matters, that is absolutely 100% correct. That was a normal thing. You know, there were a lot of instances within my family growing up where something serious would come up, and it was always like, oh, well, maybe you should go talk to the brothers, go talk, or they would do this thing where, like, if you don't want to go tell on yourself again, your parents would go to them, and then they would come to you, and you would ask to be talked to, and you would have no choice but to do it because they were in control. And especially being a kid, you really had no say. And so that truly is the culture. It's not something made up. Again, the witnesses have always stated, and this is something that I have never forgotten, that they believe that they are going to be persecuted in the last days. They think that they're the only ones that are going to be persecuted because they think that they're God's chosen people. This is not persecution. Reporting sexual abuse and exposing a secret internal database that has been hidden for years is not persecution. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up, okay? Think for yourself. How is this okay? And how are you okay with remaining in a religious cult like this that does not take action and sees it as a minor matter? You need to do some soul searching. If you're still in the religion, you really need to ask yourself some serious questions. Why are you okay with staying in a religion like this? There is so much freedom on the other side. You don't have to stay in a religion like this. It's not how your life has to be. One day, all of these people that choose to stay in this religion, the time's going to come where Christ comes. The day is going to come, and it's coming soon, where they're going to have to answer for all of these things, and they will all be judged. And they cannot say that they were not warned, because they're being warned. They're hearing these things, and they're choosing to ignore them. And as a matter of fact, just the other day, or a couple of weeks ago, like I said before, my entire family is still in this religion, and I had forwarded some information to a family member about one of these cases, and not surprising, there was no response from this person. But I was later on informed that the information that I had sent to them was forwarded to another person in my family. Because again, they view people like me that are exposing this information as a mentally diseased. If a church is telling you who you can and cannot listen to, and they're telling you that you cannot go and research your own information because it's dangerous to think for yourself, I encourage you to look up some information on critical thinking, okay? And I know that it's hard. I know that it's hard when you've been in it for a long time, but this is really, really serious. And this is your livelihood at stake. This is a lot of people's livelihood at stake. There's so many victims. And if you are an advocate for people to get justice, and you want these perpetrators to serve time, it's going to take people within to start speaking out. And I know that that's a bold claim. I know it is, because they're taught to not speak out. But it just takes one person to set off a chain reaction. One person to report something that maybe that happened to them years ago. It just takes one person. And you never know what can happen. At the end of the day, like I said, everybody has to answer for themselves on Judgment Day. So, with that being said, this last part of the article talks about how they have a sex abuse hotline, okay? Apparently in the Catholic Church, they also have one. It says Jehovah's Witnesses leaders were in many cases made aware of the abuse and documented the accusations before burying them in their archives for years to follow. The powerhouse nonprofit that provides legal support to over 118,000 congregations said that matters involving sin, such as child abuse, are addressed by individual congregations. Watchtower runs Bible schools, provides disaster relief, and helps build homes abroad. It says, okay, with all those things that they do, they said that there is a national hotline for congregation elders to get legal advice and ensure compliance with all of their reporting obligations, which has been available since July of 1989. I never knew about this. This is crazy. I had no idea that there was a hotline that the elders can call. It's like, what do they do? Do they call them and like, hey, this person came and confessed to me. Like, what do I do? Like, how does that conversation even go? Please explain. I don't understand that. It's mind-boggling to me. So this is crazy. I'm just laughing because I cannot believe the absurdity of these stories and this information. Like, all right. So the story goes on to say that decades later, the reporting of sex abuse is now at the center of a clash between the institution and the state over whether religious leaders should be given a rare legal exemption from telling law enforcement about suspected abuse. Under state law, church leaders like teachers, social workers, and healthcare experts are required, with rare exceptions, to report suspected child abuse. Again, mandated reporters. These children deserved a place to grow up in peace, not to be preyed upon. This is an abuse of trust and an abuse of power. Indeed, 100% it is an abuse of power. And that is a common theme in our society. You have somebody in a high power position that is abusing it and just doing whatever they want, and without consequence. So it said that the fight is now unfolding in a court after a Philadelphia congregation sued the state in 2020 in a case that could dramatically impact religious institutions accused of abuse and cover-up. The congregation is arguing that its elders, they're arguing in this lawsuit, that they are covered by something called a clergyman privilege, a section of Pennsylvania law that protects information shared with church elders in confidence, like secrets divulged in the confession booth. A lower court tossed the case, but the state Supreme Court has sent the case back to the court for further review. Nearly all of Pennsylvania's congregations are represented by this firm. I guess they have a lot of these cases over there because that's where the most reports are coming from. It says that they have provided legal advice to the Catholic Church as well. I don't think, like, so Jehovah's Witnesses, they live in this little bubble, and guarantee you probably 90% of them have no clue that this is going on, because they're told to not listen to these things, which is not an excuse for them. But I just know that if that was me and I was still in it and I heard these things, I would run for the hills. I mean, any person with a conscience and common sense would not stand for this sort of thing in their church. They wouldn't. They would leave. So again, a lot of similarities to the Catholic Church. It said that in at least 8 cases, the older adults preyed on their younger family members, and the abuse was carried out by community members. Many of the allegations were detailed by elders years ago and sent to the Watchtower, which again has kept a secret database of accusations, records, and interviews show. So this is not something that we're making up. You guys have got to stop with this narrative that we are making this up and that we're persecuting you. We are not. We are simply trying to make you see the truth. You claim to want to know the truth. You say that you are the truth, that your organization is the truth. Well, how about you get some real truth and listen to this, because this is truth. This is happening under your nose in real time. So, and it says that of these 8 cases, several of the assaults took place in outdoor pools and another in a public park. Oh, gosh. One member of a prominent family in this Kingdom Hall in Berks County was accused of sexually abusing at least a dozen young boys inside of movie theaters, his family business, his truck, and the Kingdom Hall throughout the 1990s, the grand jury records show. During many of those sessions, he promised his victims alcohol, the P word, porno, and marijuana. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this podcast. Sorry. The 54-year-old man pleaded guilty to 2 counts of rape in 2023 and was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. In another case, 2 victims unexpectedly received $2,500 checks from their abuser from the congregation. From their abuser in the congregation after they learned that one of the women was in counseling. The victim told the grand jury she reviewed the payments as hush money. Well, yeah, 100%. Because why else would you randomly send these women $2,500 checks? Other than the fact that, I'm sorry, I mean, no amount of money will make me be quiet, but $2,500? Definitely not. So basically, I just want to conclude by saying that I hope that eventually these people wake up and that they can see the truth of what is going on and what has been being hidden from them for years, because a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses have been in the organization for a very long time. And again, I know that it's hard to hear these things when you're in that religion and you try to ignore them and whatnot. But if you have a conscience the way that you preach to, how about using that conscience for good and saying, you know what? I can no longer sit here and ignore this. And you can be that one person to speak out and make a change, because that's what it's going to take. They're not going to listen to us, again, because we're outsiders. It's got to be someone from within that speaks up and says something. So I hope that this will eventually happen. I can pray. I pray every day that these people will open their eyes and see the truth. Thank you guys for listening. See you next time.